Raboisai, let's do it. Hilchos Losh. This took a lot of work to prepare this, to get everything straight, but I think we got it. We're going to go for it. Let's get it to you. Here we go. So the melacha of Losh is defined as binding together small particles via using a binding agent. The Tehillah David explains that Losh is the inverse of Teichen. Teichen is taking one object and making it into many, whereas Losh is taking many objects and making it into one. I bet you never thought about that. Like there's Baina Soiser, Ksav, Moichik. Well, there is, according to the Tehillah David, Teichen, Losh. I bet you never thought about it that way. But it's really the opposite. It's taking small particles, bringing them together via a binding agent. Okay. The melacha applies whether you're making food. We'll get into egg salad and tuna and avocado, guacamole, and all those types of stuff, oatmeal. Or whether you're doing a non-food item. You're making plaster, as they call it in this country, shpachta, same type of idea. That would also be the melacha of Losh. Now, one is only over Losh if the particles join together to make a single mass. If the items remain clearly identifiable, then you haven't been over Losh. So, for example, let's say you make, what are you doing? You're taking a salad, you're putting in your tomatoes, you're putting in your cucumbers, you're putting in your peppers. There's no Losh there because each item is clearly identifiable. And even your Israeli salad, there's no Losh there. Even though you cut it up nice and small, everything is still clearly identifiable. It didn't form one united mass, and therefore there is no Losh. Now, something just to clarify, the binding agent that puts the particles together in most halakhic literature is called the mashka. Don't be confused. Mashka means a liquid. But don't be confused to think that it needs to be liquid. Even a somewhat more solid binding agent still counts for over the melacha of Losh. So therefore, if somebody goes and uses, let's say, mayo, very common binding agent to use, even though that's not really a mashka, it's not really a liquid mayo is still counts, and there will be Losh. Fine. Now, when a mixture forms a thick dough, right? The classic example, if we're following what they did in the Mishkan, was seemingly, there's a machlokes on this, but putting together the dough for the lechem hapanim, part of the end of the making bread process. I think there's also a shita that has something to do with making the dyes or whatever, however that fits in. But simply, we're going to say it's the last part of the making bread process, maybe the lechem hapanim. So what is that? That's flour and water. You're making a nice thick dough, which is going to be thicker than most of the things that we're going to discuss if you really think about it. But when you make one thick dough, that's the classic example of Losh deraisa. If you make a semi-thick substance, a semi-thick mixture, then that will be Losh derabanan. What's the cutoff point where you go from deraisa to rabbanan? If it pours, even slowly, that would be Losh derabanan. So let's say your mixture has the consistency of honey, which honey it's pretty thick, but it will pour when you turn on the sides, it will pour, even though it pours slowly. That is still considered Losh derabanan. It's a border, but it's still Losh derabanan. However, something that when you turn over, it doesn't spill, it rather plops. Something that plops and doesn't pour, that mixture would be Losh deraisa. So that's the cutoff point. Something which is much more liquidy, a simple flow, and doesn't seem like it's one mass, but it's just like a liquid, so to speak. It's a drink. It's a liquid. It just flows. That would be mutter to make such a mixture. That wouldn't even be Losh derabanan. That would be mutter. So let's give some examples to clarify what we've said so far. So let's say somebody makes a peanut butter sandwich, and it's all stuck together, right? It's totally, you hold one end, it's not going anywhere. It's all stuck together, that peanut butter sandwich. Even let's say your Skippy peanut butter, real thick and connecting, right? So that would not be lush. Why? Because each piece of bread is clearly identifiable. And since each piece of bread is clearly identifiable, even though they may be super stuck together, that would not be lush. Another example, coleslaw or potato salad. So those are not an issue of lush because the potatoes and carrots in the potato salad or the cabbage and carrots in the coleslaw remain clearly identifiable. You can go and point and look, see this little piece of carrot, see that potato cube over there. They remain, their own identities remain, and if their own identities remain, then it would not be considered lush. The criteria is not the same as when it comes to what is a mixture in bayrer. Just to be clear. Even though the potato salad, when it comes to bayrer, that might be considered a mixture, there's a difference between a mixture and a single mass. You could be a mixture while not being a single mass. So when it comes to bayrer, you want to take out the carrots out of the coleslaw, that would be a problem in bayrer. Because it is a mixture, but it's not a single mass. For lush, you need a single mass, and that you do not get in coleslaw. There are some poskim, there are some svarim that discuss hack back and forth about coleslaw and potato salad. I don't get it. I don't understand. L'maisa, it seems to be quite clear to me that it's not lush. Maybe you could start hacking, the main pieces of potato don't get mixed together, but maybe those little small pieces of potato from the potato salad maybe get mixed with the mayo to become one, but I think for the most part it doesn't really.
Or it doesn't matter if conceptually maybe they just use so much of the binding agent that the color covers it. Would that matter?
Right, so I don't think it matters.
Potato salad, you'll see it's drenched in yellow.
Yeah. So if I would make my peanut butter sandwich, the question that was asked is sometimes there's a lot of, let's say, mayo used in the potato salad, and therefore you won't be able to see what's what because it's all just white. So does that mean that now it's considered one mass? And the answer is I don't think so. Because if you would take let's say you would take your peanut butter sandwich and you would put an edible bag over the peanut butter sandwich and you would not be able to see, what's what. Nobody would say that that's a single mass. It's rather different items in close proximity that are covered and I can't see it. Covered doesn't make it a single mass. It just makes it that you can't see it. So I don't think the mayo covering the potatoes and the carrots in the potato salad should be any different. Okay. What about tuna, egg salad, hummus, dough? So those would all be examples that making those, once again, there may be heterim, but if you do it stam, that would be lush deraisa. If we don't use any of that heterim that we're going to discuss later, it is going to be lush deraisa to make those items. Because they make egg salad, a tuna salad, they're very thick items. They don't pour.
Which ingredients together?
Huh? So in tuna, we're talking about putting the tuna with the mayo. In egg salad, we're talking about putting the chopped eggs together with either mayo or oil. I'm not picky which recipe you're going to use. Either way, it's a problem. Okay. And guacamole is another example of something. And hummus, I don't know what do they mix with hummus? Water or oil? Both? Probably both, right?
Guac doesn't have any mayo or
yeah, so I don't know. Probably right, it's 100% natural. I don't know. I don't know what they put in the hummus. I'm sure they put something. Okay. If you do, let's say, a thin oatmeal or a thick tahina or most baby cereals, that would be lush derabanan. Once again, baby cereals, I think you kind of have a choice of your thickness to do. But pretty much I'm discussing things that don't make a thick mass, but rather they make something that flows, that you could pour, they won't plop. They'll pour, and those types of things are lush derabanan. But if you make something like coffee, hot cocoa, baby formula, which are just watery things that flow, that wouldn't be lush at all because it doesn't form a single mass. It remains a pure liquid. And that is the categories. The pachacha, the Isha Avram, he asked, I don't understand why everybody, you'll see the place, we're all talking about egg salad. So the Pachacha says, I don't know why everybody's talking about the egg salad. It remains, it doesn't form into one entity. It remains a separate entity. I don't understand what they're all talking about. It's not an issue of Losh making egg salad. And the Eish Avram says, must be they all use egg yellows as well. So it seems, surprise, shocker, the Pachacha's egg salad, he went the healthy version, and he used the egg yolks. Now, if you think about it for a second, and you probably have never thought about this before, the egg yolk could be broken up into like a powdery form. If you just take the egg yolk and a boiled egg, you could break it down, it will be powdery even. Whereas the egg white, you cut up into small pieces for sure, but it never becomes like a powder, so to speak. So if you check out the Pachacha recipe for chopped eggs, it says mefresh only use egg whites. So the Pachacha held that when you only use egg whites, then it would not be an issue of Losh. I think the poskim don't necessarily go quite as far as the Pachacha, because I think if you would cut up egg whites into very little pieces, then mix that with maybe oil and certainly mayo, maybe that would become one consistency. I don't know if that would really be defined pieces. Though maybe, then again, I don't know the recipe in Pachach, so I don't know how they did it. Maybe they didn't cut it up so little. And I would agree, if you would take those egg whites and you wouldn't cut them up so little and you leave nice gesundte pieces, and when you mix it with whatever they mixed it with over there, then that wouldn't be lush. So, interesting fact of the day.
Also, I love very different consistencies of soft boiled, hard boiled.
No, I mean, we're talking about hard boiled egg. I think a soft boiled egg is like a newish invention. I don't know. It seems to be that they used hard boiled eggs. That's what it sounds like to me. Okay, weiter. So, the Chazon Ish and Ramosha say that if no outside binder is used, but rather you're mixing something with its internal juices, there is no lush. So one example is you mash a banana. Now when you mash a banana, interestingly enough, it doesn't just end up with little pieces of banana, but you end up with one mush that's mushed together. And that one mush that you're mixing it together, you're really mixing pieces of banana, and you're using its own internal juices to combine it into one form. And the same thing is when you mush up avocado. So Dr. Moshe and the Chazon Ish, there is no lush when you're using its own internal juices. It's only lush when you use an external binding agent. However, keep in mind, you have to worry, especially according to the Chazon Ish, about teichin. So you're going to have to use the back of your spoon or whatever it is to mash it to get out of teichin. Well, the Chazon Ish says it's completely teichin. Ramosha says you use the back of the spoon to get out of the teichin. So, America, most people definitely do that. Okay, fine. Now, there's two stages of the mixing process. One stage of the mixing process is when you combine the ingredients together. The second stage of the mixing process is when you actually knead them together. You don't just put them next to each other, on top of each other, but you actually squeeze them together, you knead them together. According to Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, you see, we're going to go back. Usually when you're learning a sugya of the halacha, you're not getting back to the machlokes tanoim. Over here, this machlokes tanoim goes all the way through the Rishonim, all the way to the poskim. Very rare that you have a machlokes tanoim that finds its way all the way. We're going to see in the Shulchan Aruch a regular psak and a yesh omrim based on a machlokes tanoim. You see it. Yes, we see it, but it's rare. So, the Maisa, Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda holds, you're only chayav for the kneading together, right? But for most products, we'll see there may be exceptions, but general products, just combining them together, there is no isser of lush. However, Rebbe holds, you're chayav for combining the ingredients. Just combining the ingredients, you're chayav. That's lush already. And then, when you go further and you mix it after you've already combined it, in Shitas Rebbe, I mean, it happens to be the Chazon Ish says you're already over when you combined it, and then you're not over when you mix it. But the Shita of the Ber Halacha, Mishnah Brura, says, and then when you go and you mix it together, you're chayiv again. So you're chayiv for combining, Lefi Shitas Rebbe, and you're chayiv again when you go and you knead it together. So the Ikar Psak, how does the Mishnah Brura paskin? So the Ikar Psak is like Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, that you're only chayev for the kneading together, not the combining of the ingredients. However, one should be machmir for the Shita of Rebbe and not even combine the different ingredients together. I know it's sounding a little out there. We're going to get dirty with some of the ingredients and some of the recipes in a minute. Don't worry. So once again, just the main point is the Ikar Halacha is only the kneading together as a problem. However, we are machmir even for combining the ingredients. That's the main points that we need to know. Now, there are special circumstances which we're actually able to be makel like Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. Now, there are certain substances, like the example that the Gemara brings is Zerapishtin, which would be crushed flaxseed. I actually saw somebody do this. You take crushed flaxseed, you pour in water, wait 10 seconds, turn over the cup, nothing's going to pour out. It's something that goes and forms one mass without the requirement of kneading. You don't need to knead it for it to form one mass. It forms one mass just by putting the water in. That type of item, even Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda holds it would be usher to combine liquid with such an item like Zerapishtin. Something that goes and forms into a mixture, combines just with the adding of the liquid. It doesn't need any kneading. There are some examples nowadays. For example, Moshe gives the example of instant potatoes. Instant potatoes, you just pour the water in and poof, Pam, it already starts combining into a single mass. Another example is the English poskim discuss this Weetabix, which is a very common English like breakfast cereal thing. That type of thing, you pour the milk in to the Weetabix, and all of a sudden it turns right away into a single mass. And that would be a problem. There are other things that the poskim discuss, which some of the stuff might depend on your brand. Maybe some instant puddings, maybe some oatmeals, maybe some baby cereals that you have to check each brand by itself. Is it the second that you add water without even mixing it, that it automatically turns into one solid mass, or does it not? I don't think we can make klolim on the other products. I think it's just you have to test that brand and see if that's what actually happens. Fine. Now, generally, when something is usher to do, when something's usher to mix, generally, a melacha, any of the lamitas melachas, it's usher to do. Oh, well, could I do it with the shinai? No. What do you mean do it with the shinai? Doing it without a shinai is usher midaraisa. Doing it with the shinai is usher midarabanan. Right? That's how it works. Over here by Losh, we have something very interesting. We're going to see that doing it with a special set of shinuyim will bring it from Aser Midaraisa. It won't just downgrade it to the Rabbanan, but it will actually become mutter. Wow! That's groundbreaking. That's unusual. So I heard a pshat as to why this is. Things that were absolutely required in the eating process, the way that the Torah made it, the Torah didn't make it that you can't eat. The Torah made it, nowadays we have fridges, so it's a little bit easier to eat. But once again, it was always the Rabbanan I understand it should be the Rabbanan when you do it with the Shinai. Usually the Rabbanan would say when you do it with the Shinai, then it's Asim the Rabbanan. I should say it a little bit better. The Rabbanan didn't want us that we can't eat. So therefore the Rabbanan were not geyser their gezerah on the Shinai, these specific Shinuyim on Losh, because the Rabbanan wanted to make sure that we could eat food on Shabbos. And Losh was something that was super required, and we didn't have a fridge. This is the only way to make it. If you made your egg salad a couple of days in advance without a fridge, it would be a problem. So therefore, this was the way to have food on Shabbos. Okay. Now that we're going to discuss the shinuyim both in the action of combining the products and the action of kneading them together. So, whereas those immediate binding foods that we discussed earlier, the Weetabix and the instant potatoes, etc., those shinuyim won't help. Those would be usur no matter what. So you really want your instant potatoes for Shabbos? Sorry, Charlie, I cannot help you on that one. No potatoes for you. That's how it's going to be. You can't get instant potatoes on Shabbos. Now, for blila racha, when you're making a thin mixture, we're going to see that the shinuyim will always help. You can make, if your result is going to be a thin mixture, you're always going to be able to make it, as long as it's not one of those instant mix items, you'll always be able to make it on Shabbos, as long as you follow the prescribed method. When it comes to a thick mixture, what we call blila ava, so shinuyim work in the kneading section, meaning if they're already combined somehow, you combine them before Shabbos, or we're going to see there's ways that you can combine them, perhaps. So then as long as you perform a shinui in the kneading section, in the mixing together in the kneading section, that will be allowed. However, if they're not mixed together and now you have to try to mix them together, that is something that we generally do not allow mixing together when it will create a thick mixture. We only allow it in very rare cases, in very big tzarechs, as we'll explain soon. So let's elaborate. A loose mixture, we allow it as long as there's the shinui in the combining and there's the shinui in the kneading. If the binding agent is thick, like mayo, for example, you do not need a shinui in the combining. What's the reason? What's the whole pshat in Rebbe saying you're not allowed to even combine? Because the second you pour the oil on that, into that eggs, it starts mixing together already. The oil into the chopped eggs. The second you pour the water into the oatmeal, it's already starting to mix somewhat. Even if it's not completely mixed, it's already starting to mix somewhat. And therefore, Zakt Rebbe, Shittas Rebbe that we're machmer for, you can't mix them together. But if you put mayo on top of the egg, nothing happens. By a thick thing like mayo, the example of some places, goose schmaltz. When you put a nice fatty piece of goose schmaltz on your oatmeal, on your eggs, it's not going to mix so well. All right, maybe we'll stick with our examples. When you put mayo on the eggs, it's not going to mix so well. Therefore, you don't need a shinui in that process, because everybody would allow that process. Even Rebbe would allow that process when it comes to something thick like mayo. And therefore, no shinui is required if it's thick. But if we're dealing with something like oil or water that is thin, then you will need to make a shinui in the order that it is normally put in by general people. This isn't what your personal order is. This is what the world in general does. So if the world in general, when they make oatmeal, first puts the oatmeal and then puts the water, which I think is what most people do. So you would go and put the water, then the oatmeal. That's how I'm talking right now, a thin oatmeal, a little bit more of a watery oatmeal. You can make an oatmeal very thick, very thin. Let's just talk about a thin oatmeal right now, a watery, runny type of oatmeal. So you would first put the water, and then you put the oatmeal. And that would be the shinui in how you put it, right? Now, what if you don't know which way is normal? I'm not sure what's normal. And there's going to be some items where you're not sure what's normal. So that you could check the box, and you're allowed to do the opposite of whatever it says in the box. So you could assume whichever way the box tells you to do it, so just do the opposite, and that is good enough. Now, why is such a minor change considered a shinui? Generally, a shinui needs to be something very weird, very strange, very different. Over here, you change the order, big whoop. So, L'maisa, we're really talking over here for the most part by Isuri Dirabanan. Right, we're talking about a loose mixture for now. We're talking about Isuri Dirabanan. For Isuri Dirabanan, all you really need is a hecker. The point is a hecker that I'm doing it in a specific way and I'm avoiding lush. Once it's a hecker, it doesn't need to be a full-fledged shinoi, and that's why the shinoi of changing the order is good enough. Now, when it comes to creating a thick mixture, though, once again, there's no issue with combining the thick substance like mayo to the thick mixture, because when you put the mayo into the tuna, nothing happens. When you squirt mayo on top of tuna, nothing happens. So you don't have to first put the tuna and then the mayo. You can do whatever order you want when it comes to mayo. If you're some weird guy who mixes oil with tuna, then you would have a problem. We're going to see that's actually you're generally going to have a difficult time making that. We'll talk about that in a second. But when it comes to the tuna, put the tuna with the oil. Put the tuna with the mayo. Now, we said that you could only mix let's say the oil and the eggs and the oil and the tuna when you have a big need. What qualifies as a big need? So one example that the place can give is preparing baby cereal for a baby. Let's say you have this baby. This is a picky baby. Baby, you want some thin baby cereal? It's geschmack. You see him? Hunger strike. No, he's not eating the thin baby cereal. He wants a thick. He bangs his spoon on the high chair. He wants his thick baby cereal. Okay, if that's what he wants, and he's in charge in this house, so that's what he's going to get. And in such a case, you could prepare for the baby the thick baby cereal by once again a shina in the order and a shina in the mixing. Because once again, what's pshat? You're relying on the shita of Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, even though you're really supposed to be makna for shita's Rebbe. But over here, what can you do? The baby needs this thick baby cereal. Another potential case is when you can't make the food before Shabbos because it would go off. Now, this is pretty hard to come up with any good cases. It's very hard to come up with a good case in this because, like, a food that you need and it's going to go off. But nowadays we have fridges. So if we have fridges, it's, very, very... I imagine once upon a time there were a lot of cases that fit into this. Nowadays there's not many cases that fit into this heter of food that's going to go off. It's going to get ruined if you made it before Shabbos. I was thinking maybe oatmeal. Because, if you make oatmeal before Shabbos, it's going to be pretty nasty by the time Shabbos comes. Maybe. But, is oatmeal such a need? It doesn't seemingly need to be a major need. But, I don't know. I see why one could say it would fit into the klolim. I just feel weird saying that you can make oatmeal on Shabbos for this. But maybe I shouldn't feel weird. I'm not sure. Stay away. You know what? Stay away from that oatmeal. Okay. Weiter. Now, there is a trick. Let's say you want to make that, I just told you we could combine the mayonnaise with the tuna, right? But if it was thin, like oil or lemon juice, that would be a problem. So based on what I just said, if you want to take oil and mix the oil with the crushed up eggs, that's going to be a problem. Because if it's going to create a thick mixture, you're not allowed to mix the thin oil to create the thick mixture of eggs. And you're not allowed to put the lemon juice into the avocado to create the thick mixture of guacamole. Uh-oh. No. He's not taking away my eggshell and guacamole. Don't worry. We have an eitzah. What's the eitzah? The eitzah is that there's a trick. I'll call it a trick. If you mix the oil with full eggs, is there any issue mixing oil with full eggs? Or you have big chunks of avocado. Is there any issue mixing oil or lemon, with big things of avocado? No, there's nothing wrong with mixing lemon juice with big things of avocado. Nothing happens to big things of avocado. A full hard-boiled egg, nothing happens with a full hard-boiled egg. You can mix oil. Now, once the oil is mixed with the hard-boiled egg, Now you'll be able to mix it together with the shinoi, which we didn't discuss the kneading shinoi. We'll discuss that soon. But if you first crushed up the egg and now you want to add the oil, sorry, Charlie, checkmate. You can't do it. If you already mushed up the avocado and now you want to add the lemon juice, sorry, Charlie, checkmate. You can't do it. But if you add the lemon to the avocado before you mash it down, you add the oil to the eggs before you break it down, that would be allowed. So that is the trick. Fine. Once the items are now mixed together one way or the other, either because it was a thick substance, or you used the trick, or you mixed it together before you combine them before Shabbos, how do you knead them together into one mass? So, one of the shinuyim, the famous shinui that the Paiskim discuss, is mixing it crisscross. You go, nothing to do with the mamzer over here. But you mix it crisscross. How do you do it? You go like this, 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 this. Mix it crisscross, crisscross. Now, the Chazon Ish says you actually have to lift it up in between each stroke. So you can't just go like this. You can't mix it. You have to actually stroke, 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 stroke. Guys, this shinoi, mixing it crisscross, for those that have tried it, it's very weird, and it's also very annoying. And if you're going to go with the Chazon Ish, sticking up, picking it up in between each stroke, that's really, really annoying. So whoever's tried doing it knows it's really, really annoying. Maybe if you have like a very thin thing, that probably is not an issue anyways, maybe it's okay. But if you're mixing together something thick and trying to mix it together like that, it's very hard to do. Now, Moshe says, the Chazon Ish is making a chumrah, making a gezerah, because you're going to end up doing a round motion, which I know it's, when you start doing crisscross, you could like catch yourself starting to do a round motion. So the Chazon Ish says the Isha Zahira, a woman that's the type of careful Zara and Halacha type of woman, she does not need to do it. But once again, it's hard to say who, what, how, when. So it sounds like we probably should be picking up the fork in between each criss and cross, and that is very annoying. I saw that Falk apparently says, and it seems like the Mashmalis and Resucha ben Cohen's Shabbos Kishya book also seems to say this. You're allowed to do, and this is a big savior if you think about it, criss, 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 cross, 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 criss, 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 cross, 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 cross. Now, if to you that doesn't sound like a big difference, that's because you never tried it. But if you compare doing criss, 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 cross, 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 it's a lot easier than each time switching off. So that is a eitzah for that mahalach. Now, there is another option, which is much easier, but it depends on who your guests are. The other option, the Paiskim say, is using your hands. Now, using your hands actually works very well. But certain items are super nasty. So it depends what you're mixing, because some things are really nasty and some things are less nasty. Oh, could you use a glove? So the Paiskim say you can't use a glove. The whole point of using your hands is that the shinoi, it's weird, it's strange. What? You're mixing it with your hands? Once you put on a glove, it's not so weird anymore. There are a lot of people out there that mix things with their hands when they have a glove. Here's an interesting one. What do you guys think about this? Take the egg, put it into a plastic bag. Put the oil into the plastic bag, whatever else you want in the plastic bag. And then use your hands to smash around the plastic bag. Is that allowed? So it's very intriguing. I heard about this first from my wife, and then I saw other people discussing it as well. L'chayra, that would work. Why? Because you're using your hand, and it's not normal. Nobody's going to tell me it's normal to smash up eggs in a plastic bag. That's weird. And if you never heard of this before, you're thinking to yourself, hey, that's a good idea, but that's weird. Yeah, it's weird. That's the point. So, and when you see somebody doing it, it looks weird. So perfect. Weird is perfect. Weird is mishuna. That's a shinai. And therefore, that would l'chayra count as a shinai. I could hear somebody arguing that takes away the weirdness of a hand. The whole idea of the weirdness of a hand is your hand is getting dirty, and over here your hands aren't getting dirty. But I don't think the weirdness of using your hands is a gzeres hakasav. Meaning, I don't think your hand getting dirty is a gzeres hakasav. I think mixing things with your hand in general is weird. A glove takes away the weirdness. A plastic bag is not a glove, and that doesn't take away the weirdness, and therefore I would think that would be allowed. But I could hear why somebody would argue, but I think that would be allowed. Okay, another potential shinoi is mixing with the knife or the back of the spoon. When it comes to like teichim, we discussed this. And the mashmois of the Mishnah Berurah, the clear mashmois of the Mishnah Berurah is you're allowed to use the back of a spoon or the back of a fork or the knife if it's not the derech to mix with a knife. Most things are not the derech to mix with a knife. And you could just use that. Now, the Chazon Ish, it's his mashmois. The Chazon Ish is less mefurish. The Minchas Yitzchak says mefurish you could use a knife. So guys, this is a much, much bigger savior than, not everybody agrees to this, but seems to, if you have the Chazon Ish, the pashtus of the Chazon Ish, you have a Moshe, and you have the Minchas Yitzchak, to use the back of a spoon or something like that. Trust me, it's a lot easier to use the back of a spoon or the back of a fork to mix that thick item than it is to start crisscrossing like the mamzer. You know what I'm saying? Why would you be busy with that? Just use the back of the spoon, back of the fork, and you're all good. Now it happens to be, I saw not everybody agrees to this. Rabbi Scheinberg and Rabbi Cheskel Roth, they both say you are not allowed to use the back of the spoon and the back of the fork. It does not work for a thick mixture. They are masking that you could use it for a thin mixture. It's a good enough shinai for a thin mixture, but they say for a thick mixture, it's not a good enough shinai. Okay. So that is somewhat debatable. Just to sum that up one more time, that using crisscross or the hands is a good shinai for kneading together, whether it's thick or thin, the mixtures. When it comes to the back of a spoon or a knife, Lefi Ramoshe Feinstein, the way that he's written Bepashtus, and probably the Chazon Ish, and definitely the Minchas Yitzchak, that would count even for a thick mixture. Okay. Whereas Reb Scheinberg and Reb Cheskel Roth say it only counts for a thick mixture, not for a thin mixture. The opposite, it only counts for a thin mixture, not for a thick mixture. Okay. Now, many people have the minhag of making egg salad on Shabbos morning. It's a Haimish Hasidish minhag. You don't make it before Shabbos, you make it dafka on Shabbos morning. Now, there's many of the Litvish Paiskim are there screaming, why get involved? Who needs these issues? Making egg salad on Shabbos morning. Make it before Shabbos. The Chazon Ish says this, many says, why get involved in all these issues? They make it before Shabbos. But the Haimish Oilim, the Hasidim, Minig Yisrael Tayahi. What do you mean, make it Erev Shabbos? We make our egg salad, our chopped eggs and onions on Shabbos. Some explain, like the Kloisenberger Hasidim, for example, are very machmir on all the halachas of leaving peeled onions and peeled eggs overnight. So therefore, there's no way to have it. They want to make it before Shabbos. Because, all that term that we use, it's mixed, it's this, it's that, whatever the term that we use, the Kloisenberger Rebbe wasn't into any of those heterim. So he said, the only time to make it is Shabbos day. And a minhag is a minhag. So we need our egg salad Shabbos day. Okay. So, Rishon Zalman actually says something very interesting. He says it's a good idea. He likes the idea of making a Shabbos day. You get to do Chazara of Hilchos Shabbos every Shabbos when you're making it. You're taking off the shell, so you have to deal with butter. Then you have the muksa shells, you have to deal with muksa. Then you're going to mash it up, there's going to be teichin issues. Then you're going to mix it together, there's going to be Losh issues. We're dealing with, we have a quarter of Hilchos Shabbos right here with the egg salad Shabbos day, Gevald Chazara. And I would add to Rav Shlomo Zalman, not only do you have Chazar of Hilchos Shabbos, you have Mitzvah Chinuch here. You're making in front of your family all the eggs, and now they're going to get to see all the halachas of making the eggs. You're able to be mechanech them. When you have to make it, that's how you make eggs on Shabbos. So therefore, there's meilas. Okay. Reb Shlomo Kluger wanted to defend the minhag of making egg salad Shabbos day. So he came up with a whole slew of reasons why perhaps it is mutter to make the egg salad on Shabbos. He says, first of all, you know what? It's not Gedulei Karka. All other poskim are like, huh? Gedulei Karka? Yeah, Toichin is maybe Gedulei Karka. But we're talking about Losh here. And Losh, there is no Gedulei Karka, no requirement of Gedulei Karka. Gedulei Karka is generally, as Moshe writes and others, Gedulei Karka is stuff for the field-based halachas, only applied to Gedulei Karka. Lush is when you're already out of the field, you're already in the house. And those things like lush don't need to be Gedulei Karka. So most of the places can go to the Rav Shlomo Kluger and say, huh? But okay, maybe, is it a sniff? Maybe. Okay, then Rav Shlomo Kluger says, perhaps the Isser of lush is only with the Sheva Mashkins listed in the Torah. And everybody else is like, huh? Where did you get that one from? So, once again, you make your eggs with mayo, you're okay. You make it with canola oil, to feed this Shlomo Kluger, you'd be okay. You make it with olive oil, you still got an issue. Okay, but the we're not really slimich on this Shlomo Kluger. Nobody's slimich on this. Nobody ever said it until him. And since nobody said it until he came around, we're not going to all of a sudden take it on right now. But it's still interesting. Another thing that he says, he brings and this is something that they asked of Diane Fisher, why is it that people make egg salad lush? Why are they making egg salad Shabbos day? And Diane Fisher said, Amaretz, the Rashba. The Rashba says that you're allowed, the same Rashba that says by Teichin there's a heter of la'alter, he says by lush there's a heter of la'alter. Now for some reason, Shulchan Aruch Mishnah Berurah, they bring down the heter of la'alter when it comes. They bring this Rashba and this heter of la'alter when it comes to Teichin, and they decide not to bring. The Mishnah Berurah clearly does not rely on la'alter when it comes to lush, and he clearly doesn't hold of this. But Diane Fisher said the minhag's like the Rashba. Fine, that's another thing that Rav Shlomo Kluger brings. Another one, potential reason to rely on making eggs Shabbos morning. Well, the Minchas Yechiel, he actually says the minhag was, which it seems like the Shlomo Kluger didn't have this minhag, but the Minchas Yechiel says the minhag was to make it with the shinai. That's how you always made it, with the shinai. Some say the minhag was to make it on a plate, not on a bowl. Normal is to make it on a bowl, and they made it on a plate, and that was a shinai. And apparently that shinai was enough. Now, why they picked that shinai as opposed to doing the shinai that the poskim spoke about until now? Tzarchin.
Be in the mixing.
Correct. So tzarchin, why that shinai would count. There's something that I saw. I didn't quite fully get the whole story, but the Baba of Hasidim have a special niggin that they sing. I don't remember how it goes. Something like that. I just made that niggin up. I'm sorry. I just made that up. But they have some special niggin that they sing when they make the eggs, and somehow that minhag acts as some form of hecker. I wasn't sure. Maybe they did it with some shinai. I didn't quite get the full story. Maybe the niggin reminds them to do a shinai, or niggin reminds them don't do it anywhere else. You only have the heter by eggs. It wasn't a little unclear what the niggin was reminding, but they have a special niggin for chopping the eggs Shabbos morning. Okay. Now, Lamaisa, if we're not going to go with these mahalchim, and we want to do it with a proper way on Shabbos, what is the proper way to make these eggs on Shabbos? So as I said before, when it comes to something that's going to create a thick mixture, we could the heter in the kneading together, that we could do a shinai and rely on. The problem is we're not allowed to mix ingredients together that will result in a thick shinai, in a thick mixture. So how are we going to mix the items together? So if you hold that you should make your eggs, as some of the poskim discussed, is another thing that Rav Shlomo Kluger discusses that if you're going to make your eggs with some goose schmaltz, geschmack, some goose schmaltz for your eggs, so that's very thick, a very thick geschmack of goose schmaltz. So that's not a problem combining it because the items don't combine together. The second you put them together, they don't automatically mix together. And therefore, you put them together with the goose schmaltz, the eggs and the goose schmaltz, and then when you knead them together with the shina, you'll be okay. So that would be all right. Or maybe a more modern example, mayo. If you hold that egg salad is made with mayo, then you're fine. You're allowed to mix the mayo with the eggs and use a shina to mix it together. You're fine. But if you hold like girsachad nukasa, if you hold like we did in the mama country, the motherland, flatbush, that I made it with oil, right? Like we have a Messiah from So if you go like the Messiah and you do it with oil, so now how are you going to do it? You can't mix the oil with the eggs. So there is a trick, the trick that we discussed. So better than that, you don't have a real answer in the poskim, but you have the answer in the trick. The trick is you're not allowed to mix oil with crushed up eggs. That's a problem. But you're allowed to mix oil with complete eggs. So if you want to make that egg salad on Shabbos, we have our eitzah. You put into the bowl or the plate, you put the eggs and the oil, you take your nice hand, squash it, right? Or you do the crisscross, or you could be makel to, as we said, you put it all in a bag and mash it in the bag, or we said you could be makel like the pashas of Moshe and pashas of the Chazon Ish, and use the back of a spoon to mix it all together, and you'll be good. But once again, you have to mix the oil with the egg when the egg's the full egg. Don't wait to mix it when it's already crushed up, because at that point it's too late. And I forgot, there's also the bachacha. If you use the bachacha recipe for chopped eggs, he only used the egg whites and not the egg yellows. The egg whites, and you make it some thick pieces, that doesn't really combine into one mass. It remains identifiable, those pieces of eggs, the egg whites, and that's also an option. Whereas the egg yellows become more powdery. Okay, how do you make tuna? So once again, tuna mayo, you can mix the tuna mayo, no problem. And then you just have to use one of those shinuyim that we discussed, whether it's, once again, your hands, crisscross, back of the spoon, bag, use one of those things to make it. What about guacamole? So you got to take the avocado, big pieces of avocado. You cut the pieces of avocado into little pieces. You cannot add the lemon juice anymore. Too late for the lemon juice or the oil, whatever you put into your guacamole. Too late. But if you have thick, big pieces, you have a big solid pieces of avocado. You mix on some oil or lemon juice, whatever it is, and only now you mix it up. Then you're fine. Once again, be careful of teichin. Use the back of a spoon or whatever. So the back of the spoon is going to work you very well. You can use the back of the spoon for the teichin and the lush, and you'll be very good according to most of those poskim. Once again, Rav Cheskel Roth and Rav Scheinberg won't be so happy with you, but enough people will be happy with you. Fine. Cornflakes. So I saw poskim discussing cornflakes. They were saying that when cornflakes get soggy and become one gush echad. I don't know what cornflakes they're talking about.
Israeli cornflakes.
I tried it.
If you leave it in the bowl for like more than 2 minutes, it becomes like...
No, but it's still clearly identifiable. You pick up one piece gets up. It doesn't, you pick up, you don't pick it up and more comes up than when you picked up. They might be touching each other, but they're not one mass. No? They're not attached. They don't attach to each other. And therefore, I think the issues of cornflakes is fake news. No problem. Make cornflakes. Another thing that I saw people discussing, I saw somebody ask for this. I was like, what are you talking about? Granola in yogurt. Because when the yogurt puts the granola together, binds them together, the pieces of granola, and therefore some want to say it's a problem. We said before, if we were discussing potato salad and coleslaw, if each thing is clearly identifiable, then it's not considered one mass. And just because you cover it with a different color that you can't see through, doesn't mean that it's not clearly identifiable. It's only when it merges together into one mass. The granolas aren't merged together into one mass. They're clearly identifiable, different pieces of granola. They're just floating in a sea of yogurt. And therefore, l'chayra, it's not a problem. What about making jello? So making jello, I think, is a problem. Because what happens with jello? You have powder. It's interesting how it works. You mix water. Nothing much is going on. And then all of a sudden you show up a half an hour later and all of a sudden it's one solid mass. So if you think what you did is you took a liquid and a solid. The liquid binded the solid together. And now you have one mass. Now I think where there's a little bit of a hak in jello, because I know there's a hak. To me it sounds like it's pashut aser. I think where there might be a hak by jello is because the water isn't actually like binding together the solids. It's more like it makes some type of chemical reaction. And I was discussing this with some Israeli paisik yesterday, and I couldn't figure out how to say chemical reaction in Hebrew. I didn't get what I was trying to say. I don't know. Whatever. But maybe some people want to say, since it's like a chemical reaction, it's not a physical binding, maybe that's why they handle it. But l'chayra, I don't see why it should make a difference just because it's a chemical reaction as opposed to a physical binding. At the end of the day, you have individual pieces of jello dust. You add the water, and now you have one big gulp of jello. And l'chayra, that would be aser to make jello. And I would say even further, that's like zerapishton. With zerapishton, that all you have to do is add water and it doesn't require any kneading. That would be aser according to everybody and no shine would help. I would say jello fits into that, and I think it should be aser according to everybody, and even a shine won't help you. So no jello on Shabbos. Okay, there's something that the poskim discuss. It's like this powder. I know everybody seems to know what this is. I didn't know what this is. Some powder that you put in your mouth, like kids, it's like a candy. They put it in their mouth, and when it mixes with the saliva, it turns into gum. It's some gum powder. You mix it in your mouth, and all of a sudden it turns into gum. So they're all hacking it. And it's not even a new thing. Rav Zalman's talking about it even. Rav Zalman knew about this candy. Rav Vosny knew about this candy. Rav Folk in England knew about this candy. Everybody knew about this candy. I don't know. Okay, so Rav Folk said it's a problem. It's aser to use.
Losh?
Because of lush. You're lushing your saliva with the powder. And there's no like shina way to do this. The way to do this is you stick it in your mouth. That's the whole chap of the candy. So there's no shina to talk about. I don't know whether it's instant or non-instant, I'm not sure, but whatever, there's no shina to do this practically. So after Rav Folk, you can't use it on Shabbos. Something interesting, which I thought was a chiddush. Rav Shlomo Zalman and Rav Vosner, they're mekel because they say ein lush b'peh. The thing why it seems like it's derech achila. I guess that's what they mean when they say ein lush b'peh. I thought that was a chiddush. Meaning, if the vart was that you put it in your mouth, it turned into a solid in your mouth, and then you swallowed it right away. Then I would be maskim, is very whatever the mitzias. Let's say there was a mitzias, some food. You put a salad in your mouth, it turns in, you put it mixes with your saliva, becomes one mass, and then you swallow it. Then I'm maskim with Rav Vosner and Rav Shlomo Zalman that it's derech achila. But this really isn't derech achila. Meaning, you mix the saliva with the whatever, it turns into gum, which you eventually spit out. Remember your mother said to spit out the gum? Yeah, so it eventually turns into one piece of gum that you spit out. I'm not saying it's not considered achila when you chew gum. But the combining together is, I feel like it's the process of manufacturing gum in your mouth, not really the process of derech achila. I could see why, I'm not saying that it's, any of this is clear cut. That's why it is machlokes between poskim. But I think the shita of Rav Folk, I mean, I don't like to be such a machmir, but I think it sounds more pashut than the heter of Rav Vosner and Shlomo Zalman. Fine. Here's an important one: Israeli peanut butter. Now, good old Skippy back in the Heim, in the motherland, Flatbush, yeah. So they used to have something called Skippy. I was never a peanut butter guy, but whatever. There you open up a can of Skippy. It's solid. It's thick. This is blila ova. You know what I'm saying? Deraisa. You know what I'm saying? Fine. Now, when you get there, it's Israel. The first couple of years, you have to bring in the Skippy from America. But once you're past that kufa, and you buy the B&D green container from Osherad or orange container. I don't know if there's a chiluk between the green and the orange. I'm not sure yet. I'm not holding it by knowing if they're the same or not. But you get the Israeli peanut butter. You open it up and you go, hey, what's going on over here? There's a whole thing of oil on top of the peanut butter. So what, they add oil into the peanut butter? What's going on? So when you actually find out what's going on, the American Skippy stuff is the one that's been messed around with. And the B&D, that's what 100% peanut butter is like. Peanuts have peanut oil in it. Look at that. And the peanut oil, when it sits in the peanut, oil rises to the top. You know, Hanukkah story and all those Vartlach. Yeah? So oil rises to the top. That's how oil works. So you have oil on the top of the peanut butter. Now, could I mix that oil into the peanut butter? So, according to the Chazon Ish, he allows it. Because as we said in the beginning, there's no lush with internal juices. So just like there's no lush with the internal juices of banana, and there's no lush with the internal juices of avocado, so there's no lush with the internal juices of peanut butter. It's not an outside factor, and therefore you could do it. However, the pashtus of the Mishnah Berurah is that it depends. It sounds like the Mishnah. This is, if we're going to view this as an outside liquid, so this peanut butter is already, when you're mixing in the liquid into this, let's say the peanut butter is already a mix of pure peanut butter and peanut butter oil, and now you're mixing in more liquid. As we're going to see soon, when you mix a liquid into a mix. So according to, even though one could argue you're making it less of a mixture because you're loosening the mixture, the shita of the Mishnah Berurah is when it's done for taste, I should do it the other way. When it's done for texture, right? It's done because you want it to be of a specific texture, then it is a problem. But if you're doing it for taste or a different reason, let's say I just don't want to see that oil on the top of the thing, then it would be allowed. But if you're doing it because I want it to smear better, then it's going to be a problem. Rav Scheinberg says when it comes to the peanut butter, it would still be allowed. But once again, he seems to be saying that's Pshat in the Mishnah Berurah. The pashtus of is, just to sum it up because it's a little complicated, I think the Chazon Ish is no issue. The Mishnah Berurah, there's probably an issue. So
you do with shiur again?
You would do it with shinoi. Now, one thing that you should note by peanut butter is, once again, if you're doing it because you can't stand the oil, or you like the taste of the oil, even the Mishnah Berurah is going to let you do it without a shinoi. But if you're doing it because you want it to smear better, or you like the consistency better when you mix the oil in, then the Mishnah Berurah b'pashtus will not allow. But it is debatable. With a shinoi, it would be allowed. However, we said sometimes that you could have a shinoi mixing with a knife. I would add that peanut butter, there's no shinoi mixing with a knife. Because I think it's normal to mix peanut butter with a knife. Since you often have the knife in your hand anyways, because you're going to smear with the knife. So that same knife is what is normal to mix with. But Shasti v'Erev, you could do it. Or if you want, use your hands. Kishmak. No? Okay, fine. Okay, fine. No heads. Okay, so you can do the Shasi v'Erev, or you can use the back of the spoon, or the back of the knife. That will also be an option. Fine. So now let's say you have a solid mixture, a thick mixture, and you want to add. Let's just do it the other way. Let's start the other way. You want to add solids to a thick mixture, to a loose mixture. Let's do it like this. Could you add solids to a loose mixture? So if the result will be that it will still be loose, right? after you add the thick items to the loose mixture, you have a loose tchina and you want to add some more hummus to it. I don't know, right? So if the result that it will still be loose, so that will be allowed as long as you use the shinuyim as discussed earlier. You have to use the shinuyim in combining and the shinuyim with mixing. And, whatever tricks, if you have tricks, you can use tricks. If you already have ground up hummus in this example with ground up tchina, it's going to be very hard to find any, it's too late for the tricks. And therefore you're probably going to have a problem, actually, now that I think about that. But whatever the example is, if you use a trick. The truth is, I don't know, it probably doesn't merge right away, actually. Now that I think about it, tchina and hummus, I don't know, it's probably not going to merge right away. And therefore, the hummus is probably like mayo, as we discussed earlier, and you probably could do that on Shabbos, and then mix it together with the shinai, crisscross, or whatever. Fine. If the result will be a thick mixture, when you mix the thick item with the... Sorry, actually I want to rephrase it. If it's going to be a thin the result will be a thin mixture, you don't have to worry. You can combine it with the shinai, and you're okay.
You need a shinoi then.
So one more time. You need a shinoi, but you're allowed to do it. Thin. If the result is thin, or you take a loose thing, you mix the loose tchina, you mix the thick hummus with the loose tchina, and you have a shinai in combining and shinai in mixing, and the result will be thin, you're good. If the result will be a thick mixture, then you need to find a way to mix it together without a problem, to combine it without a problem. The mixing with the shinai, you're always good, but combining, you can only combine it together if it's like the mayo, and it won't combine right away. But if you're going to make the thin mixture into a thick mixture, and it will combine right away, then it will be a problem. Fine. If you want to add liquid to a thick mixture, right? Let's say you have a thick mixture, and you want to add liquid to it. So you have your thick hummus. The hummus is too thick. You want to add water to it. Could you do that? So the Chazon Ish says it's allowed. This is the opposite of Losh. Losh is combining to make a thick mixture. I'm making a thin mixture. So the Chazon Ish says it's allowed. The Ber Halacha, the Mishnah Berurah, says, as we said previously, if you're doing it because you want the texture to be thinner, it's a problem. If you're doing it because you want the taste, for example, you like the taste better, that would be allowed.
But again, you can do the shinoi even if you want for the texture.
Right. If you want it for the texture, you can be able to do it with the shinai, correct. Now, but one has to be careful, if there are unmixed solids in that mixture, then even if you're doing it for taste, you would need the shinuyim. So let's say you have, a thick oatmeal, and it's so thick, and some of the stuff, there's still some unmixed oatmeal, because there really wasn't enough water in there before, and there's some floury oatmeal in there. So there, you even if you're doing it for taste, you would need the required shinuyim, because you're going to have some water mixed with that oatmeal. Fine. Now, what if you're mixing two mixtures together? So you're mixing together, so let's say you're mixing two thick mixtures together. So if you're mixing two thick mixtures, your result's obviously going to be thick, unless you have some weird chemical reaction. Your results are going to be thick, and therefore, that is allowed. If you're mixing two thin mixtures together, and your result's going to be thin, that is going to be allowed.
You're not changing anything.
Because you're not changing anything. Now, if you're mixing a thick mixture and a thin mixture, so if the result is going to be a thin mixture, then you're allowed. You just need a shinai in combining them, and a shinai in mixing them like a thin mixture, and that would be allowed. If the result of mixing the thin mixture and the thick mixture will be a thick mixture, then you would only be able to do it like the rules of a thick mixture, which means they can't combine the second that you mix it, and you mix it together with a shinai. The reason why I gave the shiur is somebody asked me last Shabbos, Yehuda Gratko asked me, could he mix honey with mustard? He wants to make honey mustard. Could he mix honey with mustard on Shabbos? And I didn't know the answer. So that's what got me to to work on this shiur. Now I want to try to think about this. Could I mix honey with mustard to make honey mustard? So what's thicker, honey or mustard? So it kind of depends on which mustard you have. I would say most mustards are thinner than honey, but you could get, they do have these very thick mustards. But let's assume it's a mustard that's thinner with honey, thinner than. So what is going on? And honey is still considered a thin mixture. So really, what are you doing? You're mixing a honey, which is a relatively thicker item than the mustard, with the mustard. Mustard is a mixture where there is mustard seeds and water and whatever else in there. So you're mixing something thick with the thin mustard. So l'chayra, as long as you would do a sheen, and the result is going to be thin, l'chayra, assuming that's not super thick mustard. So as long as you would do a shinai in the order of mixing, and you do, we'll discuss in a second. The problem is what's the order? So that's a big problem. I'll discuss in a second. What's the big problem? What's the order? And the secondly is that you would mix it with the crisscross, you'd be okay. But the problem here is what's the order of mixing it? So, and the Eli Rabbah says that if we don't know the order, then you can't mix it. And the Chazon Ish and Moshe seem to go with this. Most of the poskim say we don't go with this. I would say over here, if you're making honey mustard, the ikar is the mustard. So I think you're mixing the honey into the mustard would be the normal way. So over here, if you put the honey first, and then the mustard, and then you crisscross, I think you'll be okay. But I don't feel bad that I didn't answer that shayla, because I think it was a pretty hard shayla. Okay, thank you for listening.